Okay, I'm in the shop. I think the last project I did was the light bar thing. I came back down. And kind of probably going to break this up into two parts. I'm not really sure yet. But basically I want to get the RZR ready for the springs that are coming in another day or two. I went with Schmitty, I think is how it's pronounced, Racing. Really nice folks. Basically I ordered it online, had a couple of questions. And they got back with, I asked the questions like late in the afternoon. They got back with me first thing in the morning. So far so good on the vendor support. The main reason I went with the Schmitty Racing is I like using a standard vendor spring. They're using a major manufacturer spring that I've used in cars. So, you know, there's really not a lot of risk. You know, if something breaks or spring or they disappear off the face of the earth, I could always go back to the primary source vendor for the spring parts. They do have some of the machined items. One is a collar. They're true dual stage springs. So basically you've got your tender spring and you've got a main spring. And that collar that rides up with the springs actually has another locking collar that stops the progression. So it's a little bit more adjustable. I don't know that I will adjust it. I do ride in some rough places, but I'm not necessarily racing. So all I really wanted is something better than what I had on the RZR. I can kind of tell, especially in the rear. I'll do a shot of that. In the 900S and 1000Ss, pretty much that upper tender spring, you know, it basically completely collapses, and that's the state that mine's in now. And I've noticed it a lot with just general riding, not really hard riding as much, but definitely just putting around. The rides get a little bit rougher. So I'm going to go through and kind of show what I'm doing, the steps that I'm doing. I haven't even gotten instructions yet, but I know at this point that I have to have all the tires off, all the shocks off, and all the springs off. And the spring reinstallation, you know, requires the shocks to be cleaned up and that kind of thing. So I'm going to try to take care of all that today. So that's probably going to end up being part one of this video. And I'm guessing it's probably going to take about maybe 30-45 minutes to actually do this and get this off, get them all off the machine, get them cleaned up. It may take a little bit longer. Anyway, I'm going to get to it. Okay, here we are at the front. This is the stock RZR 1000S spring. On the front, it's just a single spring, and there's lots of shock threads still left on these. I noticed the pictures on the kit that I bought. You know, this will be a two-stage. It'll have basically a tender spring up here and a main spring. We should add a lot to the ride quality because there's going to be more spring there. And there'll be a soft section and a hard section. It's a big upgrade for the front. I did opt to go with these, keeping the stock lock washers. I think the set, I think it was around $110 for machined ones. If I do end up needing them, I already have this Fox body in Fusion 360, as well as a nut pattern. It wouldn't take very long at all to machine one out if I need to, or I can order them. But I don't think I'll need them. It's pretty simple. It looks like the tire comes off. Basically, obviously, you want to jack up the machine, get it up on jack stands, and just basically pull the shock off. One bolt at the bottom, one bolt at the top. On the 1000S, they're both piggyback shocks, so you don't really have to worry about the remote reservoir. I think on the front I'm not going to have to use a spring compressor, although I have one if I need it. But I'm going to try to get both these fronts pulled off and get this shock ready to go. It looks fairly clean, so this shouldn't take too long. Okay, I'm going to take some pre-measurements. I know my RZR is sitting lower than when I bought it stock. I haven't made any changes to any preload or anything. And I'm going to be taking all my measurements on the rear. I'll be using the flat part of the hitch plate that's pretty much the bottom of the RZR. And on the front, I'm going to use the bottom of the front tab where the A-arm bolts in. And I want to go grab a measuring device. I don't know how much you'll see, but if nothing else, for my my purposes, I'll know what this was before, and I'll know what it is after the spring upgrade. I'm fairly certain I've lost at least an inch, maybe 2, in total overall ride height, simply for the fact that I've rode the same trails where I wasn't hitting anything, and now I'm hitting things. So I know something's changed. Okay, I'm at 11 and 3/4 on the front. Verify that it's the same on both sides. Yeah, 11 and 3/4 on both sides on the front. I don't know what I had when it was stock, but I know it was more than that. I seem to remember it was supposed to be around 12, maybe 13 or 14 on the front. I'm going to go around to the back now and take a measurement. Okay, I'm around back, and basically I'm going to take a measurement right at this flat bottom of this hitch. And I know the rear has went down just simply because I can feel the hit happen a little bit past the midpoint of the RZR when I'm dragging over things that I wasn't dragging over before. And I'm just below 9.5 inches of clearance in the rear. This is pretty much the bottom of the RZR. There's, I think the tubes hang down just a little bit lower to the rear here. I'm going to measure to the bottom of this tube. Yeah, it's basically 9 1/4 to the tube. So best average will probably be like 9.5 for the rear. I'm fairly certain that's supposed to be a lot bigger. I'm going to kind of move the camera around. The front, you know, you could put more preload in. The problem with the rear is once these tender springs collapse, there's really no way to adjust out of it. And I'll move the camera and show you a close-in shot of it sitting still. Basically, this RZR's been sitting resting. I pulled it in the shop. I haven't really done anything to it other than the lock bar mount from the previous video. But I'll give you a shot of what this tender spring looks now, and then I'll lift up and show you kind of how it it'll expand a little bit if you allow it to relax, but it won't stay. Okay, here's the rear tender spring, and as you can see, it's completely I can't really get anything. Get it a little bit closer shot there. You can't really get anything in. And this has been, you know, normal riding. I don't do big jumps. I do trail riding mainly. This particular RZR has been to Windrock and Worry Hut, and then just, you know, some other local riding. But other than that, it hasn't really done anything too crazy. And this is a common problem. This will be on the, from what I understand, the 900S is set up the same way and has the exact same problem. Okay, I've got the camera set up and some light, basically to show you this machine is still at its resting state. I'm just going to pull up on the machine to kind of give you an idea. When I bought the machine, that tender spring was not compressed when it was just sitting still. And I'm going to let go and let it naturally rest. It didn't uncollapse much, but it did uncollapse. I'm just going to take a look and see how high it's sitting now with the tape measure. Okay, we're at 10 inches. Again, that's 10 inches measurement. Just by pulling up on it and, you know, gently letting it rest back down. But that's not where it would sit on the trail, and I'm fairly certain it's supposed to be a lot higher than that. Hopefully the springs will fix that. I'm sure they will. They should be here on Monday, and for now I'm just going to kind of get the RZR prepped to put those springs on. I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of what the problem was and why I'm fixing it. Okay, we got the unit jacked up, and I got jack stands underneath it, but they're not on jack stands yet. We're going to put it on the jack stands after we take the tires off. And especially if you're going to leave a razor kind of sitting like this, speaking from experience, especially if you're working on it or have things moving around it, just put your lug nuts back on. It'll help protect the threads from you banging it on anything or smacking something up against a thread. And these are going to be 15 millimeter. Okay, now we're down. Make it a little bit easier to work on. Definitely a lot safer. If you look on the razors, my jack stands are not ideal. There's a little slot right here that if you can get your jack stands on that tube, that generally provide really good support for the machine and not get in your way. And again, put your, especially if you're not going to be using it for a little bit, just put everything back quick. Okay, I got both shocks off. Basically, I've labeled each shock, top and bottom. My labeling scheme's usually driver side, passenger side, and then rear and front. So these are, that was the DR, and this would be the PR beside me. The shock bodies look pretty easy to do. These aren't too gunned up. I will need to clean them, but it shouldn't take too long. And I'll take these over the bench because what you want to do is actually kind of clamp the end, or you can actually put it back on the machine too. Just stick a screw through it. Okay, we've got it on the bench. Got our stock tool. Basically, I've cleaned off everything above the threads. We're going to thread up this way to get the spring off. Hopefully, we won't need a spring compressor. And I've used WD-40 pretty liberally just to kind of start getting the gunk off. But before you put this back on, once you screw this up on the shock body, just make sure you clean it. You don't want to mess up your threads. Okay, we got one set of springs off the rear. Getting ready to load up the next shock. And on that other one, I actually did have to use a screwdriver and a dead blow to kind of break these two rings apart. I haven't done it on this round. This is probably the best knuckle buster around. So just be careful when you're taking it off. And try to get those broke loose or apart from each other before you try to unscrew the whole lot. Once it gets kind of loose, you can kind of grab the spring down here and just kind of twist, and you can get it off pretty quick. That's pretty much all it takes. It's not a real big deal. I haven't had any issues with them yet. If your threads are getting really grimy or greasy, or got a lot of dirt, make sure you clean off those threads with some WD-40. It makes it a lot easier to get it off. Once I get these off, I'm actually going to take them and pressure wash them before I put the new rings on. just to get the threads like super clean. Kind of that's what you want it to do. Makes it a lot easier to set your preload if these are free running. I was able to get the springs off. I don't know if it's going to be true on everything, but I suspect the 1900, the rear springs at least thus far, you can back this all the way off and you've got enough room to kind of just gently down and get the retainer off the end. This is what I was talking about before. You can kind of grab this. Just be careful, don't get your hands bound up in the spring. But it comes off a lot easier, a lot faster this way. And that's it. That's the retainer that actually holds the spring on. I'm just going to pull everything off, but don't expect that I'll need again. That's pretty much it. I don't know that I'll video the actual washing. That kind of sounds boring to me, but I'm actually going to get these cleaned up. If you do use a pressure washer on these, be sure not to hit any of the seams. I'm just going to hit these very lightly. I may not even pressure wash them. I may just get them real good and soaked up and make sure that they're good and clean. That'll make reinstalling these a lot easier and setting the preload up a lot easier. Got the right size socket now. Always a good time to inspect everything while you have the tires off. Normally if I do take tires off, I'll usually pull this spindle off and grease the wheel bearing with a tool. Alright, got the front shocks off, rear shocks are off, got all my springs off. On the front shocks it may be easier to pull the springs off while they're still attached. That's what I ended up doing. If you're having trouble getting the shock bolts out, generally what you want to do is actually pick up on this A-arm. Usually the shock is all the way out. If you pick up on the A-arm just a little bit, especially in the front, you'll be able to get your bolts out just by pulling on them or pressing on them. All of my bushings, some of these have spherical bushings. I know my old Walker Evans did. These Foxes don't. I did not pull these out. I have pulled out Foxes in the past and it ends up boogering up the edge of this this plastic piece here. You can get them back in, but a lot of times they don't want to stay when you take them apart. So just be mindful of that. It really doesn't hurt the shock or the bushing, but you may have to put some grease in there just to hold that together till you get it back together. All mine are good. I can feel grease up in them. Just kind of grab them and twist them. If you feel a lot of dirt or anything like that in them, you probably want to either replace the bushing with an aftermarket bushing. There's several places out there that have those. Anyway, thanks a lot, and please subscribe, please like if you like my videos.